February the 2nd, 1141. The fate of England hangs in the balance. Maud, Empress Matilda, is at the walls of Lincoln Castle, her forces amassed, her conviction clear. After all the injustice, all the heartache, and all the sacrifice, this is the moment the Hycathi and their allies have been building to. For this is where two cousins clash for the very last time. Hello, I'm Dr. Annette Lynton, and we are here. I can't believe we've reached the end of the First Hycath War. Welcome to the 6th and final instalment of the Clash of the Cousins. And we have a belter of an episode for you this week, packed to the brim with action, laughter and tears. And somewhere we've got to find space to discuss the last of our 6 significant Hycathi, Maud's general in the battle, Gabriella Fitzwalter. Now, I know a good deal about Gabriella, if I say so myself. I wrote my PhD on her nearly 20 years ago. But it wouldn't be a very engaging podcast with just me filling in now. Plus, I thought I should probably include Nottingham's resident expert on the Fitzwalter line. Please welcome the esteemed Professor Gilbert Arlin. Over to you, Gilbert.
Good afternoon to you all. I must say, Dr. Lynton, you've made quite something of yourself in recent years. How long ago was it that we spoke at the East Mercia Palace?
Whoa, that's a blast from the past, all right. Well, it was before I got Scenes of Nottingham, but just after I left my teaching post, so I'd say somewhere in the region of 7 or 8 years ago. The war wasn't even up.
Good grief, how time flies. I expect you won't have lost your vim and vigour.
I would hope not, indeed. Now, this should be a rigorous and challenging discussion, I'm hoping, between us.
I shall be the defence counsel to your prosecutor.
Wonderful. Now, I imagine many of our listeners will know of you from your column in the Nottingham Chronicle, but those of us who've been in academia are all working our way through your series of books, The Fitzwalters. I remember when the first volume came out, I read it over the summer and it went straight on the reading list at Barton for the new term. You've now published volumes 2 and 3.
Yes, and volume 4 is projected for release at the end of this year. I've been most fortunate in making the close acquaintance of His Majesty the King over the past decade, since he has granted me access to the private archives of the Fitzwalter family held in Nottingham Castle, which have been invaluable to my research.
Wonderful. So I imagine we'll be getting an inside scoop then?
We must exercise discretion in these matters.
Oh, quite. OK. Well, if we don't get started soon, we'll run out of time to cover everything, so let's get cracking, shall we? Now, we've already heard Lucy Bolingbroke's side of the story, but done our best to overlap gracefully. That episode stayed inside Lincoln Castle, where Lucy was trapped. Now, this week we're stepping outside the castle and rewinding a bit.
It all started here, in Nottingham, where the Empress Matilda, Maud, you might say, first encountered Gabriella. Now, Gabriella's skills are well documented. Not only had she demonstrated her aptitude at combat in many a battle, she also possessed a most brilliant strategic mind with which she kept Nottingham's various districts safe and in order.
And yet, it didn't surprise me to read that Gabriella's appointment by Maud wasn't unanimously well received among the Hycath ranks. After all, this was the last pit stop before the battle, meant for recruiting reinforcements, and no one really expected the command structure to change so drastically.
Empress, I must protest. Why do you insist on bringing this Norman woman into our company?
I do not choose my allies with the sole aim of disquieting you, Alice.
Men of her bloodline ravaged my home and my family, and I am expected to answer to her?
She carries the blood of Hecate in her veins, a blood stronger than that of any Norman.
Empress, I have served you with my very life's essence. I have travelled and toiled the length of England, abandoned my own daughter, and barely escaped the wrath of the usurper of Blois in your name.
You will receive your just reward, but Gabriella is your general, and I wish to hear no more dissent.
This is where we delve into Gabriella's complex ancestry, half Norman, half Hycath.
It gives me no pleasure to reveal that our royal family are the product of an affair between a Norman noble and an Englishwoman empowered.
Gwilym Fitzwalter, to be precise, one of Willem the Conqueror's knights and Gabriella's grandfather, and you can say Hycather.
Yes, all right. He was castigated, as was she, and the castle he had built here in Nottingham on William's orders was stripped from him, as were the rest of his assets. William Peveril would receive them, and his son, William Peveril the Younger, would inherit them. Gabriella would be his subject.
Except she was more than that, wasn't she? The work she did along with her partner, Margareth Loxley, we shouldn't skim over that.
Oh, of course not. Margareth Loxley acted as Gabriella's drill sergeant and had access to a small company of soldiers belonging to the earldom of Huntingdon. Her father had died prematurely, and she was left as acting countess until her brother came of age.
But it's what they did with those resources that fascinates me. Travelling around what was then the county of Nottinghamshire, taking from the rich and giving to the poor, especially when you consider that Robin Loxley is her descendant.
True, but each brought their own skill. Gabriella's was to achieve all the social vigilantism she could whilst still answering to William Peveril. You might say she played up her Norman blood when it suited her and Margareth.
Well, I suppose she could be seen as more of a Norman in that case. To an outsider, definitely. I understand why Alice Eymor disapproved.
And yet, Gabriella's ability to reconcile her Norman ancestry with her dedication to the Empress cause is testament to a great moral strength, in my professional opinion.
Well, she and Alice had met before. We touched on that in our second episode. I have to say, I do agree with you on that, Professor Arlin.
That meeting is barely corroborated by the available historical record.
Well, granted, but we have ample evidence of Alice's feelings, and we know she carried her mother Meredith's legacy. In fact, it could have been a problem with Maud, who was half Norman herself, but Maud had long supported Meredith and her work. Gabriella was a new face.
I would still contend that Gabriella deserved her place in the Empress Matilda's Maud's army. The Battle of Lincoln would not have had the same outcome if not for her involvement.
We must deploy our resources with precision. Stephen of Blois has many men at his command.
I have lived with this betrayal for 5 years, Gabriella. The usurper must be slain, once and for all. I care not in what state you leave him.
Victory is not yet ours, Empress. I advise you, do not underestimate the wrath of righteous men.
No wrath can be stronger than mine. And as for his feeble breed, they will be powerless before us when we have 2 Neridii in our number. Force them by touch to fall on their swords. Singe their legs with wildfire. Turn their very lifeblood to vapour. You have every one of Hecate's powers at your disposal. Use them. And do not let hesitation stifle you.
I act in your name, Empress. We all do. And I need no reminder of the urgency of our cause. But you have given me responsibility, and your war is waged with forces I have purloined. I cannot be cavalier in my methods.
And by what methods do you presume to deal with the usurper himself? A man hardly disposed to your well-being.
We have 2 Neridii in our number, Empress, as you yourself said. A third, if you count the Countess. I can occupy myself elsewhere on the field of battle.
Gabriella's level-headedness in this difficult situation is quite commendable.
Oh, I completely agree.
And your dramatization has captured it perfectly.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, it is super, isn't it? But we have the whole battle still to come. So, in order not to get confused, we should do a head count of who was actually on the battlefield at Lincoln.
Well, there's Gabriella and the Empress, naturally. Gabriella heading the charge. I needn't mention Alice Eymor. We've heard her speak.
True, and supporting them would be Rosmarine Doulard and her 2 Neridia recruits.
And Robert of Gloucester, who had accompanied the Empress.
Oh, of course, how could I forget Gloucester? The gang's all here. Well, not quite all of them. Maud had instructed Aurélie Paquet to remain in Nottingham, with instructions to follow should the battle develop complications. But that was a worst-case scenario, wasn't it?
And needless, as it turned out.
Of course. But there was one person Gabriella couldn't entirely leave behind. Her 6-year-old daughter, Alviva.
This is a sad detail of Gabriella's life. She'd given birth to 2 daughters before Alviva, but both perished in a fire whilst she was away. She remained racked by the guilt of being unable to save them and became especially protective of Alviva as a result.
She sleeps?
I have put her to bed, but she is asking for you.
This may be my last chance to see her. What if the usurper triumphs, Margareth? What will become of Alviva without her mother?
She will have a mother in me.
You would do that for me?
Without question.
I have lost all but you and her. No more.
You are doing important work. For her sake above all others. Imagine a world where Alviva never has to make the sacrifices you have made.
A fine world indeed. I fight for little else.
You must focus your mind on it.
I shall. First, I will go to my daughter's side, hug her and tell her I love her 8,000 times. By Hecate, I will bring her this victory.
I thought it important that we show the full extent of Gabriella's philosophy. To win, but without taking unnecessary risks. And from someone with a 5-year-old girl of my own, woe betide you if you cross a mother protecting her child.
I don't doubt it.
So perhaps, Professor Arlin, you'd like to take us through the battle as it was fought?
With pleasure. Gabriella had taken care to spread out the many and diverse factions of her army so as to maximise its efficacy. Each outer flank would have a Neridian Hycath at its head, one supported by Margareth's company and the other by the Empress's own men. Gabriella herself would remain in the centre with the Empress and Gloucester's men, directly opposing Stephen's main cavalry.
Oh, that's some excellent strategy going on. You've got the appearance of a centre-heavy formation, and your flanks look undermanned, when in fact one Neridia counted for 1,000 foot soldiers. And if anyone got too close to the castle itself, well, as Gabriella pointed out earlier, they'd have Lucy to contend with.
What is this hellfire? They do not touch us yet, we are set ablaze.
This is a power far greater than any I have seen, by God.
We must warn the king.
I shall. Take your men and go, before you are consumed.
Drive against the forces of the temple. Your swords will cut through the flames.
My liege, the Empress has summoned her darkest evil and has us overpowered.
You will return to your combat, William. Let not the machinations of Cousin Maud frighten you. You are stronger than that.
But my liege...
Do as I do, and you will persevere.
For a short while, Stephen stood firm, hoping to set an example to his scattering men. But eventually he must have realised that if he still wanted to win this battle, being killed right there and then would do him no favours. His next move was to make a tactical withdrawal, somewhere he could take stock, regroup, and launch a new offensive. Maud and Gabriella's plan was working. but only so much.
Stop! By Hecate, stop!
Clear this path! You are before your king!
Only a coward flees battle. In the name of Eymor, I shall deliver you to the Empress.
By God and the English throne, you shall not! Let no more of your kind bring me grief.
We knew it was coming, but it still hits really hard.
Yes. Well, I'm afraid those are the consequences of disrupting a well-laid plan. Gabriella had arranged her army, Alice included, so that such recklessness would not be necessary.
Oh, I think Alice had every right to go after him.
There would be opportunity enough to defeat King Stephen. This was an utterly pointless casualty.
OK, of course, I will give you that, Professor Arlin, but people do make snap decisions in the heat of battle, something Gabriella as a general would have been inured to.
Yes, you're right, but let it be said that she did not see it that way.
We had him, Margareth. The usurper. His army was scattered, terrified. How could I lose him?
You must not take responsibility for the usurper's actions.
Who else am I to blame? The Empress put me at the head of her army and allowed me my battle plan. You, my forces, obeyed my every instruction. I should have his head.
He cannot have strayed far. He will want a fresh victory. And he is no longer surrounded by valiant men.
William of Ypres is loyal to his king.
You are a Hycath!
Forgive me, Margareth. Your patience is boundless. I can no longer stand by and wait for a Neridia to do my work for me. I made a promise to Alviva.
It gives me no pleasure to see you go, but it is right. Exactly as you always have done. As you always would do. To stand in your way would be sacrilege.
I have my methods. Pray Hecate they serve me.
So Gabriella put her Plan B into action and made the journey to Stephen's garrison without reinforcements and without the knowledge or assent of her Empress. And who should be standing guard at the garrison wall, loyally as she predicted, but William of Ypres.
Stop there! You are an enemy of the king. You have no right to be in this place.
I have come to end this strife, once and for all.
Then you will surrender to me.
No. With a single touch, I can subdue you. Your men, your king, will be of no help.
I should raise the guards first.
Too slow. All I need from you is your blood, William. Now, you will bring about your master's final downfall.
William, you abandon your post.
I have urgent news I must bring you, my liege. News that cannot wait.
What could be worth troubling me at this hour?
The advent of a new dawn, my liege.
William?
This is the judgment of Hecate.
Dr. Lynton, as an historian, I must admit to being a tad perturbed. The established historical record states that William of Ypres, not Gabriella, took Stephen's life in an act of merciful heroism to spare them all from obliteration by Neridian force. The dramatisation we've just heard is based entirely in rumours, which have never been accepted as history, prevalent though they are.
Oh, yes, well, that's true, Professor, but you and I both know these rumours, and there are published sources corroborating them. Oh, I felt that justified us exploring the possibilities. Plus, well, they are quite entertaining, you have to admit.
Entertaining, yes, but that is as much as one can grant them. That said, I intend only to clarify and not to diminish Gabriella's role in events. She was no passive agent in this war.
Exactly. She can claim her place in history regardless.
Most assuredly.
Great, we're in agreement. Now, we've got a few minutes left, so I think what would be best is if we handed over to Maud and Gabriella themselves to hear the news we've been waiting to hear this whole series.
Daughters of Hecate and faithful allies, bear witness. It has been a long and arduous fight, with years of our toil and torment tirelessly invested therein. We have lost many of our own before their time, some in these last months, and their lives stand as reminders of the importance of our work. But we have also made great discoveries, led grand charges and opened our minds to boundless possibilities, and now we reap that harvest. Now we stand tall above the ashes of our persecutors. The usurper of Blois is dead, and his nefarious church are in flight from our island, never to show their faces here again. I, Empress Matilda of England, proclaim the dawning of the Age of Hycath.
Ah, Empress Matilda of England indeed. I must admit, I felt a great inner peace hearing that. But then, I'm sure I wouldn't be alone. I've read enough testimonies from those who were actually in the temple. I imagine you have too, Professor.
Oh, the accounts are voluminous.
Yes, they are. So, there we are. The cousins have well and truly clashed, and things will never be the same again.
Yes, this was to be a time of strictly matrilineal succession, as opposed both to the patriarchy that had gone before and to the more universally tolerant practice observed today.
Well, this was the first age of Hycath, Professor. Matrilineal only partly covers it. You've got to admit, it made a refreshing change at the time.
I find myself forced to concede to your conviction, Dr. Lynton.
How very gratifying for me. Plus, all those events that came down the line, remember, are their own stories. For another time, and maybe, just maybe, another podcast. For now, though, I would like to thank profusely our wonderful Professor Gilbert Arlin for his contributions to this episode.
You're most welcome.
And, of course, I'd like to thank my team, who you can't see, but who've been absolutely stellar in their efforts towards producing this series and flying the flag for Strands of Time. And, of course, last but not least, I would like to thank you, my dear and most wonderful audience, for choosing this podcast, sticking with it, and spreading the word. It's you that we make it for, so your engagement counts for everything and is very, very much appreciated. Take care out there, my dear ones. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep an open and active mind. But don't go just yet. We had to give Maud her moment in the spotlight, obviously. But this, in the end, is Gabriella's story.
Yes, I had hoped we would give her the closure she deserves. Naturally, your audience will have guessed from the presence of our king that the Fitzwalter line exists to this day, having survived throughout the years and ages as rulers of East Mercia, and all as a consequence of Gabriella's great effort.
Not to mention that she was able to return to the two people who mattered to her the most.
The Empress was generous in her victory. Those women among us who had served and survived were rewarded with lands and titles, duchies of a new England ruled by women and for women. Nottingham returned to my family, Huntingdon became Margareth's to keep, and the Peverills became mere citizens, subjects of ours. The whole country stopped, contemplated, and started again. And despite the inevitable dissenters, It is quite remarkable how a society moves on. Within a year, universities were established, laboratories being built. No true science was prescribed, no knowledge locked away from those minds who had cried out for it over generations. Guilt was no more a weapon, only evidence of a crime. And my dear Alviva would forget the world she had been born into.